Aloha, I am Christy Chadwick. I have a master's in deaf education from Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. During my program, I learned alongside audiologists to learn more about the science of the ear and also how devices work, such as hearing aids and cochlear implants. With this, I learned a method called listening and spoken language, or LSL. Now living in Hawaii, I run an organization called Hawaii Hears. My mission is to deliver services to families who have children diagnosed with hearing loss, who use hearing aids and cochlear implants. I also provide education and awareness to professionals in early intervention around language development for children who are deaf or hard of hearing. The main focus of Hawaii Hears is to provide support to families, to empower them and help them get what they need to be able to communicate with their child. In this series, we hear from audiologists, teachers of the deaf, parents of children who are deaf, and individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. If you want to learn more about my services or what Hawaii Hears offers, please visit hawaiihears.com. You can also donate by clicking the donate button at hawaiihears.com. Mahalo. Aloha. This is an interview with Jacob Knoll. He is a college student at Ole Miss, and he tells his story of his journey with hearing loss. He is profoundly deaf in both ears, and he uses a cochlear implant to listen and talk. In Jacob's interview, we get to get an inside look at how college is going for him, what accommodations he uses in order to have more access to the lessons, and what he does in social situations with peers and when he meets new people. So I hope you enjoy this little inside look into Jacob's world. All right. Hi, Jacob. Thanks so much
Hi,
for joining me today and
of
telling
course.
me a little bit about your story.
hmm
So you are deaf.
Yes, I am 100%
Okay.
deaf. I was born deaf.
Born deaf. Okay.
Yes,
What degree of hearing loss do you have?
it's like profound.
A
Yeah.
profound. Okay.
hmm
Bilaterally?
Bilaterally profound. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not sure the proper terms, but yeah.
That's okay. Right. So both sides, you have a profound hearing loss in both ears.
Yes.
And what kind of devices do you use?
I wear a cochlear implant, so I'm going to go ahead and take this off and show you.
Sure.
So, when you-
Okay.
so I wear a cochlear implant on my left ear. Mhm.
Okay. And then these headphones you're using, they just go right over the
Yeah, they
processor?
just go right over. It's just normal headphones, and it goes right over the microphone, and it works just fine, so I can hear you just fine.
Cool.
It works really
Awesome.
well.
Awesome. And how old are you, Jacob?
I'm 21.
Okay. And where are you right now?
I am currently on campus at the University of Mississippi, which is where I go to college, and I'm majoring in chemical engineering. So it's a lot of fun here. Mhm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I'm a
Okay.
junior, so I've got 2 more years left. So I'm in the home stretch now. So it's a tough degree, but it's a lot of fun. It's worth it.
Yeah, so you're in those classes now that you get to really focus in on your degree.
Oh yeah, yeah. The first 2 years are the basic, classes that all the engineers take, and now I'm really getting to the nitty and gritty of chemical engineering, and it's really challenging, but it's also really rewarding at the same time. So I
Yeah.
enjoy it. I picked the right major for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember, so your mom was part of the series,
hmm
Dory, and she was my instructor at Washington University.
Okay.
And I remember when you were in high school, you were getting ready to go to college when I was,
Yeah.
she was my professor. And there was a lot of talk of how you were doing in school and how you were wanting to focus on engineering. How did you come to that decision to focus on engineering?
So I've always been naturally good at science and math. Like it's always just clicked in my head. I think in numbers. And I think one thing, so obviously engineers make cochlear implants. So biomedical engineers made the device. And that has always been one of my biggest motivations is that engineers made something that completely changed my life. Like I don't know where I would be without my hearing device. And so that was one thing that kind of pushed me towards engineering is that I could possibly create something that could help somebody to the degree that has helped me today. And that's been one of my biggest motivations doing that. Plus, it pays great. So it kind of worked out that, my motivation's good, it pays well, and I've always just been good at science and math. So it's the perfect degree for me. I definitely made the right choice.
Cool. Yeah. What do you hope to do with the degree after college?
So I want to focus on aerospace. I've always had a passion in the aerospace industry. And I actually did an internship last summer in Huntsville where I worked for a company called Aerojet Rocketdyne. And I was basically making rockets. So that was super fun. Like I worked with NASA and a bunch of other companies. And that was a lot of fun. So I hope to do that full time, work at some kind of aerospace company and focus on that full time. Just because it's super cool. Space is fascinating.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
super cool. Really awesome.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, if you don't mind, I wanted to hear a little bit about your background as well, and you growing up, and maybe you can tell us how you got interested in space,
Yeah.
and maybe start with a little bit about what you remember of your hearing loss journey of getting the diagnosis and
Yeah.
then getting your implant, and then how
Yeah.
that was for you.
Okay, so I don't remember too much when I was diagnosed. So I was born in 1998, and at the time there was not pre-screening for babies with hearing loss. So my parents didn't find out until I was almost a year old, and I got my first implant, like 13 months around that. So I obviously don't remember that. I was very young.
Mhm.
Um, but I do remember growing up. So I tried hearing aids at first, and those didn't work out too well. So then I switched to an implant, and I've always had some version of an implant. So my first one, I forgot exactly what it was called, but it was the kind that you actually wore around your waist. The processor was on your waist, and the wire would run up, and it would connect to your headpiece up here. So I've always had a variation. And then my second one was an advanced bionics. It was like a bigger version of this. There's a bigger version, and it is an AIDA, so the smallest version, super lightweight. It's awesome. I love it.
Mhm.
Um, so I've always had some type of cochlear implant to go up with. So that's what I'm used to. And it definitely was a challenge when I was younger because I couldn't always listen to talk like I do now. It took like hundreds of hours of hard work, like going to audiology appointments and doing speech therapy in school and doing drills outside of school. Like I remember I would wake up. So back then, so let me backtrack a little bit.
Mhm.
I went to the River School in DC for several years to learn how to listen and talk a little bit there. Then we moved to St. Louis, where I went to the Moog School for my preschool years. And at Moog School, there's a school for listening and spoken language. So I don't even know sign language. I know a few words, but I really don't know it too well because my parents really emphasized learning how to listen and talk so I could be as successful as I could be in a hearing world.
Mhm.
So I learned how to do that at Moog. And I remember days where we lived like an hour away from Moog because that was the closest we could get. And then back then, I remember just waking up at like 5 a.m., driving an hour to Moog, doing school for 8 or 9 hours. So like nonstop drills and exercises. So I would do that. We would drive back, and I would do more drills and exercise for like 2 to 3 hours after that. So like that's all I did was just drills, 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 and exercises, exercises, exercises. And at that time, I was really stubborn and did not want to do it because it
Mhm.
was just a lot of work. I wanted to have a life. I did have a life, but I wanted to be like a normal kid, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was definitely very stubborn doing that. But looking back on it now, if I hadn't done all that, I would not be where I am today because it is a lot of work to get to this point. You're gonna have to work your butt off. You're gonna have to sacrifice some time. You're gonna have to sacrifice time with friends and free time because you're gonna have to put the work in to get the results that you want out of that. So it was a tough journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like there was so much time in those early years. We were probably what, three, four,
Yeah,
five when you're at the MOOC school.
yeah.
And
It
in
was my
that
preschool
time,
years.
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
those are my memories. I remember doing drills. I remember going to the audiology appointments. But at the same time, we made it fun. So like my mom would be like, "All right, Jacob, we got to go to this audiology appointment, but afterwards we'll go get pizza and ice cream." So like we would make it like a fun day of it. So like that definitely helped me um come to terms with doing all this stuff. Is we would have rewards afterwards, and when I do drills, we would go watch a movie or get some candy or something like that. I love food, so they would buy me with food, and that worked pretty well. So, we would always make it fun. That's
Good.
important to make sure it's not just work. You gotta attach some rewards to that. Make it
Yeah, you
worth
have to live a little and have some
it.
fun. And
Exactly, because
yeah,
it's part of your life. You gotta make it. got to make it a central part of your life. So you just make it like a normal day out. Oh, it's just another day, audiology appointment. That's no big deal. We'll go get some ice cream afterwards. And that
Hmm.
kind of helped me. So
Yeah. And when you were, in between work and doing doing your drills and learning how to talk and learning how to
mhm.
listen using your devices, and did you have much social time? Were you able to hang out with friends?
Yeah, I did. So I was really big into sports. So I did a lot of my free time playing sports. So I did when I was little, I played soccer. Like I love soccer. It's probably my favorite sport to play. So I did both indoor and outdoor soccer. And so I made good friends in those groups. We became really close. We went to the same schools, and that's what we did. We would do team dinners to prepare for games. And after dinner, we would go to somebody's house and have a sleepover. So that would be my social life is through sports, but also outside of sports, like while preparing for the game or something like that. So that's what I did in my free time with my
Hmm.
friends. So I had a lot of fun. So
Very cool. Were most of your friends hearing, or were any of them from the MOOC school?
yes, so going back to my story, so after I finished MOOC, so I did my preschool slash
Okay.
kindergarten years at MOOC, and then when I was, so how old was I? However old you are in first grade, so like 8 or 9,
Yeah,
some
six
yeah,
or
eight,
seven,
nine,
seven
10.
or eight. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mainstreamed in first grade in
Okay.
public education at an all hearing school because at that point we felt like that I was ready to be with other kids with hearing so I could learn how to interact with them. So that's why my parents wanted to mainstream me in public education so I could learn how to interact with these kids and learn how to be a deaf child in a hearing world. So in
Hmm.
first grade, I think I was the only deaf child at this public school that I went to. So all of my friends were hearing. Like I actually don't have any deaf friends today. Every single one of my friends is hearing. Like I'm the only deaf person in my life right now.
Hmm.
So, mhm.
Okay.
So yeah, all the kids I played with, they were all hearing, and I would sleepovers, they were all hearing. So that was definitely another unique challenge, is
Yeah.
being the only deaf child, because all these people have probably never seen a deaf kid in their life. So they didn't really know how to interact with me. So the fact that they didn't know how to interact with me would always make them treat me as if they were lesser than me, if that makes sense. They would just
Mm.
treat me differently because they weren't sure exactly what my device was. All they knew was that I maybe looked different, I maybe talked a little bit differently than them. And for a long time, I like took that to heart, and I was like, "Oh, I'm different than these people, so I'm not as good as them." So that was definitely a real challenge, and it took me a while to start advocating for myself because I felt like back then, if I advocated for myself, that would just only confirm you know, their assumptions of me, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So then I wouldn't advocate for myself. I wouldn't tell them, I'm deaf. This is my cochlear implant. Is what it does for me. I didn't do that. I would just let them think what they thought, and that definitely affected me and made me very anxious and just a lot of social issues, stuff like that. I was pretty depressed because I thought I was different from them.
Hmm.
But then over time, I learned to begin advocating for myself. And I found that when you start telling people what the cochlear implant is, when you start telling people about being deaf, then it makes them more comfortable around you. So then they'll actually start treating you like a normal person. So then it took me a while to kind of get to that point with the hearing people. But I found that that's my biggest piece of advice. And that's the biggest thing that really helps me is just talking to them like a normal person, just telling them, being upfront, say,
Hmm.
hey, I'm deaf. You might not have seen this. It's a cochlear implant. It's what it does. That just makes them treat you normally. So,
Hmm.
mhm.
Right, because a lot of it is just they don't know. They don't
Exactly.
know why you sound different than them, why you have a device and they don't have a device, and yeah,
Because there's
so
not much
you have to
education
explain.
about that. I mean, there's
Hmm.
not many deaf people that they probably interact with on a day-to-day basis. They might have just heard
Yeah.
some things or seen things on TV, and that's not accurate to what an actual deaf person really is in today's world. So,
Hmm. Right. What would you say is most accurate for today's world and having a deaf person around? What would you say is more accurate than what is portrayed on TV or?
like the most accurate way. Oh, I don't watch too much with. See, that's the thing. Is like
Yeah.
there's not much representation of the deaf culture. There's really not.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to think of an example.
There's
There's one
not.
switched at
Switched
birth.
at
Like that's the
birth
only
is the
that's the
only
only
one
thing
I
I can
can
think
really
of
think
right
of.
now.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
really nothing else, which is
Mm-mm.
kind of unfortunate. Like those types of disabilities really are represented. Like blindness,
Hmm.
deafness, it's mostly just diseases that are represented. Like
Hmm.
Alzheimer's, something like that. And so that's another thing is people just don't there's just not enough information people educate themselves on. So it's really up to you as the deaf individual to educate them because they're not going to know. And if you educate them, then they'll become much more understanding and much more accepting and much
Mhm.
more forgiving of you. So
Yeah, that self-advocacy piece, it plays a huge role in not
yeah.
only your emotional well-being, but also
hmm
everyone around you so that they can sort of learn more about you. And
Yeah. It took me a long
yeah,
time to realize that. Like, you need to advocate for yourselves because it's going to make you more comfortable and them more comfortable. It's just going to build that degree of trust between you
yeah,
and a degree of open
absolutely.
communication. Because you
Absolutely.
can't expect them to know, your specific needs. You can't expect them to know how to treat you, and they might not know that you can't hear without the device, or it can't get wet, or stuff like that. That they're not going to know that. Only
Hmm.
only I know that, so I have to tell them that to
Hmm.
educate them.
Right. Yeah. How did you learn what to say and when to say it for yourself?
That just honestly just trial and error, just practice. Like,
Hmm.
the more people I met, at first I was really awkward. It's hard to open a conversation with somebody that you first meet for the first time. To me, it just sounds awkward. It's like, "Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm deaf. Nice to meet you." That's just
Hmm.
awkward. So,
Hmm.
like, I just learned to figure out
Yeah.
ways to kind of naturally integrate it into the conversation. So, like, sometimes here's one thing. So I notice when I talk to people, their eyes will naturally kind of dart to my implant. So, like, they'll make eye contact with me and their eyes will kind of dart to my implant. So if I
Hmm.
notice them doing that a lot, I'll say, "Hey, I noticed you've been looking at this. It's an implant. It's what it does for me. I'm deaf and this helps me hear." And that's just
Hmm.
sort of a natural segue because they might be like, "Oh, I'm sorry for looking at it, but then I'll reply, it's like, "Oh, no, it's fine. Everybody does that. So I just wanted to make sure you knew what you were looking at." So I've
Hmm.
just learned to kind of find natural segues into the conversation. That's kind of what I do. I don't just do it right away. You got to wait a little bit, break
Sure.
the ice, get to know the person, introduce your name, stuff like that. So yeah, I find that's the best way. It took a while to get to that point.
Yeah.
I was just a super awkward kid, so it just took me a while to
Mm.
just practice makes perfect,
Hmm.
essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Work it into the conversation
Yep.
and figure it out. And you also have to know about yourself, and you have to know about your devices and what it is that you're hearing and not hearing, and
Yeah.
so that you
And you
can
have to learn how
explain.
to say it in terms that they will understand, essentially. You can't just throw a bunch of, deaf lingo at them. You got to put it in simple terms that they can understand, essentially.
Hmm.
So, mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, very true. Yeah. So you grew up in St. Louis,
Yeah.
and you ended, for the most part, after after the River School, and you went
Yeah.
to the Moog School, and you ended up going to mainstream. And throughout your time in mainstream, what were your biggest interests, and how did you get into what you're doing now of aerospace
Yeah.
and?
So I've always been a huge sci-fi nerd because I've
Mhm.
always been interested in like the future and the possibilities of technology because growing up, technology has always been right at the forefront of my life because the cochlear implant is a very technologically advanced device. Like, I don't even understand how it works, and I've tried.
Mhm.
It's a very complex device, and so I think that really instilled in me a sense of awe for what technology can do. So that's why I've always been drawn to a sci-fi, is because it explores what technology can do for humans, now or for in the future. And a big aspect of future sci-fi is space travel. I've always been a Star Wars fan, Star Trek fan, and all those shows.
Mhm.
And so space is very central to sci-fi. So that's why I've always been interested in space because, obviously space travel today is not what it could be in the future. It's not like, we don't travel by light or we don't colonize other planets yet, but we will soon in the future, hopefully. And
Mhm.
so that's why I want to work in space because I want to maybe have a part in furthering our frontier of understanding and knowledge in space exploration and travel. And I
Mhm.
want to be a part of that in any way I can. So that's why I've always been drawn to a space because of my love for sci-fi, essentially.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, very
Thank you.
cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's challenging, but it's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding. And like at Aerojet, I worked at my internship.
Mhm.
I worked on the Space Launch System, which is NASA's new rocket. They're going to take it to the moon and to Mars. So I had a hand on that, and I laid my hands on a rocket engine that's going to space next year. I can't say for what rocket, but I touched the rocket engine. So it's
Sure.
really, really cool stuff. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's my dream come true, essentially.
Yeah, that's incredible. Very awesome
Thank you.
opportunities that you've had. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And then next summer, I'll be working for the same company AirJet Rocket Night, but I'll be in Miami this time, Miami, Florida. So I'm super excited for that. 'Cause that's right by Cape Canaveral, which is where a lot of the rocket launches happen, for SpaceX and NASA. So I'm super excited for that. That'll be a great summer.
Yeah, there will be a lot of
Hmm.
action, I'm sure, that you'll get to
For
be a part
sure.
of. Hmm.
Hmm.
So, in your time in college, what has been your biggest challenges?
So the biggest challenge is sort of the same thing I've been talking about is people here just have never really talked to a deaf person. And I think there's only, gosh, just like a handful, maybe like five or less deaf people that I know of that go to school here at Ole Miss, which has, 40,000 students. And, obviously we're a very small community and there's just not many other people out there. So that's just one of the biggest challenges with all the people I meet every day. I meet somebody new every day. It's just sometimes hard. As I keep interacting with these people and going to classes with them, it's sometimes hard to find the right moment to bring up the fact that I'm deaf and to educate them on that. So I've run into challenges with that, and also with the professors. Most professors here have never interacted with a deaf student,
Hmm.
so I wouldn't say it's a challenge. It's more of just something that I have to be conscious about. So I work very closely with the Office of Disability. They're incredible at Ole Miss. They work very close with me and they ensure that I have all the resources I need. So I use a personal FM system. So it's a Roger pen, if you know what a Roger pen is.
Hmm. So the
Yeah, so I use
instructor
that.
uses the pen or wears it.
Actually, so what I do is, yeah, I'll show you.
Okay.
I've actually got it with me right here. So I use this the Roger pen right
Hmm.
here, and so I just use it. It's the ones like omnidirectional. So I just set it on my desk and I
And it
point it
picks
at the
up.
professor. Yeah, it picks it
That's
up. So
awesome.
that's one thing that I talk to the office with is I want preferential seating. So I
Hmm.
like to sit in the front row. One, because I like to talk to the professor and develop a relationship with them, but also because I hopefully hear them better. And so I just put this pen down on my desk and I can pick up the professor and the people around me. So I
Hmm.
use that, and with the Office of Disability, I tell them I want, closed captioning for any videos that we play because I can
Hmm.
understand movies, but it just makes it easier for me. And so I found that, so back then in the past, what I did, IEP meetings, so there's sort of the
Hmm.
similar thing with the Office of Disability. I compare that to IEP. I
Hmm.
didn't want any part of that. I was just like going to these meetings and talking to the teachers is admitting that I'm different. And at the time, I just wanted to blend in. I just wanted to be treated normally. So I would refuse to use any accommodations. I didn't use my FM system. I didn't tell my teachers what I needed. And if we played a movie, I wouldn't ask them to turn the subtitles on. I
Hmm.
didn't want to draw attention to myself. So it took me a while to learn that those resources are there for a reason. Like they
Hmm.
make your life easier. FM system allows me to hear much better and not have to focus so much and get so tired of listening all day.
Hmm.
Captioning just makes my life so much easier. I can just relax and enjoy the movie. And so at college, that's where my biggest hope is on the first day of classes. I go up to the professor, I introduce myself, and I tell them my needs essentially. And they've all been more than accommodating. I feel like in today's, they understand that there are people out there with needs and they will do whatever they can to meet those needs. So
Hmm.
it's been great. Ole Miss is great for that.
That's great. Yeah, good for you.
Mhm.
And figuring out that those things are helpful and you want
Oh
them,
yeah,
and they allow you to succeed in
exactly.
school so that you can get the language, get the all the lessons, and make sure that
Yeah,
you are not
because I can
having
do
to strain
fine.
yourself either.
Exactly. I can do just fine
Hmm.
without them, but I'll become exhausted at the end of the day.
Yeah.
A full day of active listening. That's one thing that people don't understand. Like hearing people is that
Hmm.
they're always surprised to learn that, when you're deaf, it's all active listening. There's just not much passive listening. And that's why sometimes we're just so exhausted at the end of the day. My friends will be like, well, why don't you want to go out? We're in college. People go out at like 10, 11, 12 at night, go to the bars or go wherever. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
I'm too tired. I've been a long day of listening. I got to
Hmm.
sleep to recover my energy. And that's just something that I have to educate them on is that I'm always active listening. There's just not much passive listening. And so that's what these resources allow me to use to take some of that strain off of me and put it on the technology just to make my life easier.
Hmm. Yeah. So do you go home and take your devices off at the end of the day and stop listening for a little while?
I've done that. So like, yeah, I do that. So like what I do when I go home is I just watch Netflix and I just sort of mute everything and I just focus on Netflix and then I'll put the captioning on to make my life easier. And when I'm getting ready
Mhm.
for bedtime, yeah, I'll take my devices off and I'll study and I'll do some homework just in total peace and quiet and I'll go to bed. It allows me to kind of just really relax and kind of shut my brain off. So
Mhm.
I do that. Yeah, it's very nice. It's actually very helpful in college with like noisy roommates or something
Yeah.
like that. Just take it off and just escape the world. So it's very useful.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, totally. You can just take everything off,
Just
recharge, reset, and then
exactly. It's actually
start.
pretty great because I can study anywhere essentially. I can just take it off and I can just study in total peace. So it's got its advantages.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so cool.
Mhm.
We're about at our time, but Jacob, I've really enjoyed listening to you and
Of
hearing
course.
about your story and your life and all the things that you're doing now. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
thank you so much. I really appreciate this
Yeah.
opportunity. I always love telling people my story now, and I try to just tell it to anybody that listens. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully we can check back in with you and see how everything wrapped up with your summer and um,
Okay, great.
what
We'll
you got
do.
to learn. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. So I
Yeah.
appreciate this
You're
opportunity.
welcome. Thank
All right.
you. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.